Hello and welcome to my kitchen. So today is the day that I am going to take all of these cucumbers and turn them into pickles. And I don't just mean like refrigerator pickles. We're gonna can some pickles today. So last year was the first time I had ever canned anything. And I actually ended up canning about 20 jars of pickles, probably 7 or 8 jars of marinara sauce, and about 20 jars of apple butter. So today I'm going to show you how I make pickles in my water bath canner, which is back here on the stove making a bunch of noise. So first, let me give you a quick tour of what I have going on here. So I have my cutting board, my massive amount of cucumbers. This is the burpless cucumbers, and there are also just pickling cucumbers under here. These are all washed, and they all have all the spines rubbed off. I am going to do spears with the pickling cucumbers and coins with these burpless ones. I also have whole black peppercorns, and I also have this, which is made by Ball. It's called Pickle Crisp, and it just helps your pickles stay crisp, hence the name. It is pretty much just calcium chloride. I mean, that's literally what it is. So I have those two things here. I also have a bag of peeled garlic that I actually just picked up at Aldi. This is like the best ever because I hate peeling garlic. And then I have my ladle, and this is a jar lifter. You don't have to have one of these necessarily. I grabbed this last year before I did my big process at the end of the season. But when I made my pickles last summer, I just used a big pair of barbecue tongs, and that was totally fine. And then I also used a bunch of salt. In the sink, I have a bunch of dill that I actually just went out and cut. Just, giving it a little rinse off, giving it a little bath. And over here on the stove, I have my lids and bands in some simmering water. And then this is my pickling solution. So this is 3 cups of 5% white vinegar, which is just normal white vinegar that you buy at the store, and 6 cups of water. And I use the water out of my refrigerator, so it's filtered. And then I put a little over, probably a third of a cup of salt in here. I used a half cup measure cup. I noticed the last second, so there may be a little more than a third of a cup of salt, but that's what is in here. And I am just going to get this to a slow boil, and then I'll cut the heat, turn it down, so it can just all incorporate. And in here, this canner I actually got from my grandparents. I don't have the lid. They have the lid, but I just don't have it. But in here are my jars, boiling away, sanitizing. I have 7 wide mouth pint jars in here. And these are the same jars I used last year. Just wash them, and then before you use them, just throw them in here and let them boil away. So all I'm going to do now is just cut up all these cucumbers in various shapes and sizes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut everything up, put them in big bowls, and then as I pack the jars, that's when I'll, get everything. And I want to go ahead and get everything chopped first. Well, I filled my bowls, and there's still 3 cucumbers left, so I think I'll give these to someone. If you noticed, I didn't use the whole cucumber. Like, I didn't use the very end parts where the seeds aren't very big because that's just not my favorite part of the cucumber. So I have my chips and I have my spears. Now I need to get them all packed in the jars. So the jars have been in here for about 15 minutes maybe. And this is the kind of boil you want. You want like a rapid boil. I have my heat all the way up as high as it'll go. And it's pretty much just gonna stay like that. My pickling solution, my vinegar, water, and salt is pretty much done. It doesn't really need to like boil or anything. My lids back here are simmering away. I'm gonna turn the heat up a little bit on those. Those you just wanna keep, you just wanna simmer them so they're nice and sanitized, the lids and the rings. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the jars out of the canner, leave the canner on, leave it boiling, and then I'm going to put them on this towel. And underneath this towel is some pot holders just to keep the counter from getting too hot. Because that's, I don't know why, that's what I do. And it provides a nice pad for the jars to sit on. And then we're gonna get these babies loaded up. So I have my jar lifter, and this is pretty much just a pair of tongs. It's shaped like a jar lid. And you just lift it out and then dump all the water that's in it out and just put it over here on the towel. My canner fits, oops, dropped one. Happens. This fits 7 wide mouth pint jars on one level. It also has a rack that I can put in it if I wanted to do 2 levels. But since I have a glass stovetop, it's not recommended to do more than 1 level of jars at a time, just because of how heavy they are. So I just do 7 jars at a time. All right, and I am just gonna leave that on. Leave it boiling, and now they are ready to fill. All right, so this is where I'm going to load my jars. I'm gonna do my spears first because the chips can be used for refrigerator pickles, but these are better when they're canned. I have my garlic here, get that opened up. And this is just peeled garlic. I just buy it in a bag because it's easier. And then I have my fresh peppercorns. I mean, they're not fresh, they're probably expired, but peppercorns. And my pickle crisp. Now, the pickle crisp tells you how much to put in. Rounded 1/8 teaspoon per pint. So this is just little granules. So I usually just get a tiny measuring spoon. Here's a 1/4 teaspoon. So basically I'm just gonna use like half of that. So I have my little oven mitt because these jars are hot. And I also need my dill. Here is the dill. I don't have a place to put it. Just throw it right here. And this is just dill that I just cut from the garden. And the canner is still going on the stove. Turn it down a tiny bit so I don't overdo it. Basically, I'm just going to take some dill, shove this in here. And I don't really have like an exact amount of dill I use. I just kind of shove dill in here and then that's how much I use. I don't really measure it at all. That's probably good. That's about, I don't know how much it is. And so then I'm just gonna take my pickle crisp, throw that down in here. My peppercorns, I just dump, I don't know, 8 or 10 peppercorns down in there, and then I shove a clove of garlic down in there. So this is how all my jars look before the pickles go in. That jar is hot. And then all I do is take my spears and I just pack them down in here. Now some of them might be too tall, in which case I just come through and cut them down a little bit. And it does happen, sometimes your cucumbers get a little tall, or they get a little long and then they're too big for the jar. See, like, a lot of these are too long, which is not that big of a deal. I just kind of trim them as necessary. And by trim them, I mean I'm cutting off like 1/2 inch, and then they're going in just fine. You want to pack them as tightly as you can. I mean, you would be surprised how many you can get in there, and then you'd be surprised again when there's room left when they come out of the canner. And you're like, what the heck? I didn't think I could fit any more in there. So this is packed full. Actually, I may be able to fit one more down in there. One more small one. Yep. Okay, now it's packed full. This is what it looks like. It's packed. I'm just gonna put that back over here, and then I'm gonna grab another one. They're not as hot now. And I'm gonna do the same thing. So next is to ladle this hot liquid over the jars, or over the cucumbers. So I'm gonna grab this with pot holder because it's gonna get hot. And this is actually the ladle for my Instant Pot. I was gonna use my big ladle, but this one's smaller and it's a little easier to manage. So you're just gonna ladle the hot liquid over. And then when it gets close to the top, sit it down, and you wanna leave 1/2 inch of headspace. So that means just leave 1/2 inch of space at the top between the very top of the jar and where the liquid starts. And that is because as you process these, the water's gonna boil, or the pickling liquid's gonna boil, and that one needs to be cut off a little more. And you don't want it to bust the can. So that's why you leave room. Now every canning recipe is gonna have a different headspace, or it may have a different headspace. Not all do, but some do. So just keep that in mind, read your recipe. Only use canning recipes from like legit sources. The Ball website, freshpreserving.com, actually has a lot of good canning recipes, which is actually where I got this recipe. I did modify it a bit just because I don't use the Ball pickle spice mix. I use my own. I prefer fresh dill and garlic and peppercorns and salt instead of the pre-packaged mix. But Ball actually does make the pre-packaged pickle mix that you just dump in there, and you dump in your water and you process it, or you boil it together, and then you have your pickling spices. So the next step is to wipe the rims of the jars. I'm just going to use a paper towel, and you basically just come around and wipe the top of the jar to make sure there's no liquid on it, or like a cucumber seed or a piece of dill or anything. You want to make sure the tops of the jars are all dry and clean. That will make sure that they seal correctly. Like that one had a cucumber seed on it. Give everybody a good wipe, and then that's it. Now the next step is the final step before they go in. Those are hot. And it is to put your lids and bands on. And just be sure to buy new lids every year. You can't reuse the lids. You can reuse the bands, but not the lids. So these are the same lids I've had for years. But they are new, or the same bands, but the lids are new. The lids are just like a one-time use thing. So all you have to do now is tighten them, and you want to do finger tight. So as tight as you can get it without struggling too hard is basically how I do it. So just tighten the band as tight as you can get it without like struggling too hard. You don't want to do them too tight because actually you're not going to store these with the rings on. You're going to take the rings off and store them that way. Okay, so they're ready to go in. So the next thing we're going to do is basically what we did earlier but in reverse, and now the jars are full. So I'm going to take my jar lifter and I am just going to put them in the canner, and be very careful because this water is boiling hot. And then we're going to set a timer for 15 minutes. And we're going to leave them there. Now, you're supposed to cover them up. But I don't have the lid to this canner. So I am just going to leave it open, I think. I also don't have any aluminum foil because I forgot to buy some at Kroger. So I'm just going to leave it open. I'm going to let it sit for 15 minutes, and then when the timer goes off, we're going to leave it, turn the heat off, and leave them in there for 5 minutes. And then we'll carefully remove them with the jar lifter and put them back on our little padded towel area. All right, so the timer went off. Turn that off. We're going to turn the heat off. I did find a lid. I'm gonna take the lid off, and we're just gonna let them sit in there for 5 minutes. So there are our finished jars. They will sit here on the counter for 24 hours. So tomorrow when I come home from work, I can take the rings off, and I usually write what it is and the date I packed it on the lid. There's like a little spot on the lid where you can write the date. And then I take them down to my basement where I have cold storage. Not cold, I mean, that's what it used to be for. We just have like shelves down there we keep stuff on. So yeah, now over the next few hours, you may hear like a pop, and that is a good thing. That's the lid sealing. Normally I don't have a problem with anything not sealing. As you take them out of the canner, you'll hear like a, that is the air being sucked out of the jars. So the lids get pulled down onto the jars and then they stay. Tomorrow, if any of these jars, if you push on the lids and any of them flex up and down, those you need to put in the fridge and use within a week, because they didn't seal correctly. Now, if they did seal correctly, you'll push on the lid and it won't move. Just like if you would buy like any other jar of like pasta sauce or whatever, the lid on that doesn't move until you open it. Same thing here. So, I mean, that's how I make pickles. That's how I can pickles. It's not hard. It is super easy. And there is some space in the slices jars, but that's just how it is. It's impossible to pack slices tight enough where there's not space. So thanks for watching this canning video. And I will be sure to do a few more as I can other things throughout the season. So I will see you in the next one.